Hello everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to the channel. Now, I want to start today's video by presenting you with this question. What if I asked 100 people, what's the most dangerous job in the United States of America? What do you think the answer would be? Probably be firefighter or skydiver or police officer or snake charmer, right? But what about meatpacking? What? Meatpacking? Yes, we go into a grocery store and we see this line of meat, chicken, poultry, beef, lamb. We see all this meat. But the last thing we'll think about, the people who are putting this meat in our grocery store, how dangerous that job is. Well, today we're going to uncover the ugly underbelly of meatpacking plants. And it's going to reveal the ugly truth about just how dangerous it is working in these plants and the conditions that these workers work under. So stick around. You don't want to miss this. In 2017, a worker at a JBS meat processing plant in Colorado died after being crushed by machinery that lacked proper safety guards. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration investigated the incident, found the company guilty of serious safety violations that directly contributed to the death, and imposed a penalty of $58,709. That's what federal regulators assessed when corporate negligence killed a worker trying to produce cheap meat for American consumers. This tragic case reveals the human cost of America's industrialized meat production system, where companies prioritize production speed and cost reduction over worker safety. The story demonstrates how federal penalties for workplace deaths are so minimal that they provide little incentive for companies to implement safety measures that might reduce profitability. The incident exposes systematic problems with workplace safety enforcement in an industry that processes the meat consumed by millions of Americans daily. The worker who died was an immigrant who had taken the dangerous job at JBS because it provides steady employment in a rural Colorado community with limited economic opportunities. Like most meat processing workers, he faced daily exposure to hazardous machinery, repetitive stress injuries, and production pressure that prioritized speed over safety. Meat processing consistently ranks among America's most dangerous occupations, with injury rates among the highest in U.S. manufacturing. Workers face risks from sharp knives, powerful machinery, slippery floors, and chemical exposure in environments designed for maximum production efficiency. The worker's death wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of safety failures that characterize industrial meat processing throughout the United States. The incident investigation, OSHA investigators found that JBS had failed to secure equipment and ensure proper machine guarding, potentially in pursuit of production targets, creating the hazardous conditions that killed the worker. The company was aware that the unguarded equipment posed fatal risks, but chose to maintain production rates rather than implement safety measures. Federal safety inspectors documented that supervisors had instructed workers to operate dangerous equipment without proper safeguards, prioritizing production quotas over worker protection. This constituted serious violations of safety regulations under OSHA standards. The investigation revealed that similar safety violations existed throughout the facility, indicating systematic disregard for worker protection rather than isolated equipment failure. The minimal penalty. Despite finding JBS guilty of serious safety violations that directly contributed to a worker's death, OSHA imposed a fine of $58,709, less than many Americans pay for a luxury car. This penalty represented the proposed OSHA fine for the violations documented in this case. For JBS, a company with annual revenues exceeding $50 billion, the penalty amounted to a fraction of daily corporate income. The fine provided no meaningful financial incentive to improve safety practices or prevent similar deaths in the future. The federal penalty went to government coffers. Any compensation for the worker's family, if pursued, would come through separate civil litigation or workers' compensation channels rather than the OSHA enforcement action. The industry pattern, JBS's safety record, reflects broader problems throughout the meat processing industry, where production pressure consistently overrides worker protection. Meat processing companies regularly face OSHA citations for safety violations, yet continue operating with minimal changes to practices that endanger workers. The industry's injury rates are among the highest in U.S. manufacturing, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics data. Workers suffer amputations, crushing injuries, chemical burns, and repetitive stress disorders at rates that consistently exceed other industrial sectors. Companies treat safety violations as routine business expenses rather than urgent problems requiring immediate correction, calculating that penalty costs are lower than safety improvement investments. Documentation from OSHA enforcement records shows repeated violations at facilities that have previously been cited for similar hazards. The regulatory failure. OSHA's minimal penalties for workplace deaths reveal fundamental problems with federal safety enforcement. Maximum fines for companies when workers die through preventable incidents are often less than penalties for environmental violations or securities fraud. The agency's limited enforcement budget means that most meat processing facilities receive inspections only after workers are injured or killed, rather than preventing dangerous conditions through proactive oversight. OSHA data shows that in any given year, only a small percentage of workplaces receive safety inspections due to resource constraints. Now, for decades, meat companies claimed that their workplaces were getting safer. Injuries were down, they said. However, federal inspectors weren't convinced. So from 2009 to 2012, OSHA conducted surprise inspections at meatpacking facilities across the United States of America. Close to half of all the facilities that were inspected had record-keeping violations. Employee interviews revealed that workers feared reprisal for reporting incidents. Some said they were threatened with losing their job if they reported it. On-site medical staff discouraged employees from reporting recordables. Earlier government studies from past decades found that approximately 23% of workplaces under-recorded or misclassified injuries, making dangerous jobs appear safer. When companies control the injury data, the truth about what's going on seems to disappear. When companies face penalties for worker deaths that amount to minor business expenses, the regulatory system struggles to fulfill its mission to protect American workers from preventable harm. The economic calculation for meat processing companies, workplace safety represents a cost-benefit analysis where worker protection competes against production efficiency and profit margins. Companies consistently choose speed and cost reduction over safety measures that might prevent injuries and deaths. Installing proper safety guards, reducing line speeds, and implementing comprehensive safety training would increase production costs, potentially raising meat prices for consumers. Companies avoid these investments by externalizing safety costs onto workers and their families. The current regulatory system allows companies to maintain profitable operations while workers bear the physical risks and families bear the economic consequences when industrial negligence causes injuries or deaths. Most Americans consuming cheap meat products remain unaware of the human costs embedded in industrial production systems. The true price of inexpensive meat includes worker injuries, deaths, and families affected by preventable workplace accidents. Consumers seeking the lowest possible meat prices inadvertently support production systems that prioritize cost reduction, creating market incentives for companies to maintain practices that may compromise worker safety. This disconnect allows companies to externalize safety costs while consumers avoid confronting the human consequences of their purchasing decisions. The distance between supermarket shelves and processing plant floors obscures the conditions under which meat products are produced. Some international data suggests European meat processing operations maintain better worker safety records through stricter regulatory enforcement and higher penalties for safety violations. However, direct comparisons are limited by differences in reporting standards and regulatory frameworks across countries. Companies operating in international markets demonstrate that safer production methods are economically feasible when regulations require proper safety investments. The contrast suggests that American worker injuries aren't inevitable consequences of meat processing, but may result from regulatory systems that provide weaker enforcement mechanisms. Countries with stronger worker protection laws and enforcement systems show that meat can be produced with improved safety outcomes when companies face meaningful consequences for endangering employees. Meaningful change would require penalties that exceed the economic benefits of maintaining dangerous working conditions, mandatory facility shutdowns for serious safety violations, and criminal prosecution of executives when negligence causes worker deaths. However, such reforms face resistance from industry groups that profit from current systems and legislators concerned about economic impacts on communities dependent on meat processing employment. The political influence of large meat processing companies ensures that worker safety reforms face significant opposition. Current proposals for reform include increasing maximum OSHA penalties, providing additional enforcement resources, and strengthening criminal liability provisions for workplace deaths caused by willful violations. These changes would require congressional action to modify existing workplace safety statutes. Understanding the human cost of industrial meat production helps consumers make informed decisions about supporting companies with better worker safety records. Choosing meat from producers that prioritize worker protection supports more ethical production systems. Local and regional meat producers typically maintain closer oversight of working conditions and face community pressure to treat workers safely, providing alternatives to industrial processors with systematic safety problems. Supporting farmers who raise animals using traditional methods often means supporting operations that don't require the dangerous industrial processing systems where most worker injuries and deaths occur. Consumer demand for ethically produced meat can influence industry practices over time. The $58,709 penalty for a worker death caused by serious safety violations represents society's official regulatory response when corporate profits are at stake. This amount reflects how current workplace safety statutes value the regulatory consequences of preventable deaths. The disparity between corporate revenues and worker safety penalties reveals policy priorities that have historically favored production efficiency over more stringent safety enforcement mechanisms. Okay, so it's May 2020, and COVID-19 outbreaks are exploding in meatpacking plants all across the United States of America. And the local health departments are trying to shut them down. But these meatpacking plants had allies in Washington. Congressional investigations reveal that these meatpacking plants coordinated closely with USDA officials to try and circumvent these local health departments' attempts to control the virus in these facilities. These USDA political appointees began to call these local health departments directly. In Mercer County, California, when local officials tried to close a Foster Farms plant with a major outbreak of COVID-19, a USDA official intervened. Local officials were told, get this, closure is not an option. The result at that single Foster Farms plant, 392 workers were infected with COVID-19. 8 of those people died. When federal officials side with the meatpacking industry over workers' health, people pay with their lives. When federal agencies treat workplace deaths as regulatory infractions with limited financial penalties rather than serious crimes requiring substantial consequences, they signal the relative weight given to different policy objectives in workplace safety enforcement. JBS received a $58,709 OSHA penalty after a worker died due to serious safety violations, a fine that represents a tiny fraction of corporate revenues for a human life lost to preventable hazards. This penalty reveals how current federal workplace safety statutes limit regulatory consequences when companies prioritize production speed over human welfare. The minimal fine for a worker's death demonstrates that America's meat processing system operates under regulatory frameworks where penalties for fatal incidents amount to minor business expenses. When companies face such limited financial consequences for worker deaths, safety improvements that reduce profitability remain optional business decisions. Every piece of cheap meat carries hidden costs in worker injuries, deaths, and families affected by preventable accidents. Understanding these human costs helps consumers make informed decisions about supporting production systems that prioritize different values regarding worker protection. If this investigation into workplace safety failures was sobering, share it with others who purchase meat without knowing the human costs of industrial production. Understanding how cheap meat prices are subsidized by externalized safety costs helps everyone make more informed purchasing decisions about the products we consume and the systems we support. So there you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got value out of this video. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel. It just helps us to continue to create this content and to bring the things that's going on behind closed doors to the light. to let you know what these workers' experiences are, the things that are hidden from the public. They are very important. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, like the video. Also, take a look at the MAP 30 challenge. You'll find a link to that in the description. It's just a program designed to help us lose weight and get healthier. It's a 30-day challenge. You can find all the information on the page. Just click on the link in the description. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video.